Hey Rip City, this is Matisse Leibel, and it's time to open the briefcase with Casey Holdahl.
Greetings, Blazer fans, and welcome to The Briefcase, presented by Spirit Mountain Casino. Episode 141 of The Briefcase, presented by Spirit Mountain Casino. I am Casey Holdahl, and after over 2 weeks on the road with a brief stop off in Portland, the team is finally back in town for an extended period of time. It was a long 2 weeks, I think over the course of 7, 8, 9 games, I think 16 days. One of those days being in Portland, but then heading back out playing Golden State, which the team returned from on Monday night. So now we're back for the last extended homestand of the season after 2 weeks, as I mentioned, on the road. Trailblazers coming back, playing the Pistons, losing to the Pistons at Bill Walton night, which we'll discuss. Head to Golden State, play the Warriors, also lose to the Warriors in San Francisco. 4 straight losses for your Trailblazers. What does that do for their play-in chances? That's something we'll also talk about on this edition. And we'll hear from Toumani Camara. Talk to him on the last road trip about a number of topics, winning Defensive Player of the Month, where he feels like he's made the most strides, where the team has improved, coming together on the road, a whole host of other topics. Always great to talk to Toumani, which you will hear on this edition of The Briefcase, presented by Spirit Mountain Casino. Well, after 7 games in 13 days, the Trailblazers returned to Portland to host the Pistons on Sunday. Trailblazers ended up losing that game 119-112 on Bill Walton night, as I mentioned. First off, let's talk about Bill Walton night. Great event, great night. Luke Walton, one of Bill's sons, is an assistant coach for the Pistons. So rather than do something earlier, Bill passed away in the offseason in May at the age of 71. Team decided that we wanted to have Luke in the building, knowing that it can be difficult, particularly for coaches or for anyone who works for a team, to make time during the season in order to kind of get away. They set that up for the game versus the Pistons. Turned out great. Tons of Bill's family, tons of his friends, tons of his former teammates at Moda Center to celebrate the life and legacy of Bill Walton. A lot of tie-dye, a lot of Grateful Dead cover band stuff, a lot of remembrances. Just a really fun night, talking to Lionel Hollins and Dave Twardzik and Larry Steele and some of the other players on that team. Talking to Luke and other members of the Walton family who were in attendance. Just a great opportunity to celebrate Bill. Something that I imagine we'll probably do on I won't say a regular basis, but I imagine that will probably not be the last time that we'll be celebrating Bill Walton at Moda Center. Unfortunate that Bill passed. Still something that I still think about actually on a fairly regular occasion. Just how much better the world would be if Bill Walton was still in it. But nevertheless, a great opportunity to celebrate Bill. And Luke even talked about Bill didn't want like people to be sad about his passing. He didn't want a large kind of dour funeral. He wanted people to celebrate his life if they were going to do anything, and that's what I believe the team did on Sunday. So it was great to see. Really glad for everyone turned out in attendance. A sold out crowd for that one as well, which was fantastic. And yeah, just a really fun event. Really glad that one of those things where it's obviously a sad thing for Bill's passing, but when you can turn that into something that people enjoy, and when it becomes something that is a celebration. That's the best way to do it. So shout out to everyone who had a part in that. I thought, between game ops and the team and the Pistons and the crowd and the people who performed, I just thought it was a really nice night. So kudos to everyone involved. Fortunately, the Trailblazers not able to get the victory in that one. As I mentioned, they end up losing 119-112. Back and forth first half. Cavs take the lead early in the second quarter and never relinquish it from there. They go up by as many as 18 in the third quarter. Blazers able to rally, as they've done a lot as of late, which is why I had asked Chauncey Billups recently, in a lot of these games, Blazers, playing it close, getting down double digits, then rallying back, making a game of it, and then just not being able to do the things you need to do to finally get the win. And so I was curious from Chauncey's perspective, like what has to start happening next in order for you guys to start winning some of these games against the good teams? And it's basically like this is just kind of part of the process you have to go through. You have to learn how to win close games. You have to learn how to stay close in games, and so you don't have to expend so much energy getting back into games. And that's just kind of where they're at in the process right now. Is that I feel like they're to the point now where teams around them, they're winning those games, though they're still losing some of those from time to time. And now it's more the teams that are ahead of them in the standings, teams that are better than them. They're generally playing those games pretty well right now, even if they're not getting the victory, which is what we've seen in the last couple games for the Trailblazers. So, they get down versus the Pistons. Gets, a semi-close game in the fourth quarter, but never really got to the point where you really felt like the Blazers were going to win that game. At least I didn't really feel that way. Uh, and again, they're playing shorthanded. They didn't have Denny Avdia in that game, and I think we're really seeing how important Denny is to this team. Jeremy Grant did return for that game, which was great to get Jeremy back. Did not play in the next game versus the Warriors, while Denny did play in the next game versus the Warriors, which we'll talk about here in a second. But either way, the Trailblazers not able to get that victory versus the Pistons. That they always talk about, the last game or the first game back after a long road trip. And that's like an incredibly long road trip. We get back from Oklahoma City in the middle of the night on Friday night, basically, or Friday night, technically Saturday morning. Um, Saturday is a blackout day, meaning, nothing at the practice facility, no workouts. Maybe guys get treatment, but for the most part, like everyone's supposed to kind of stay away. Um, I'm guessing if the players were anything like me, they basically slept for most of the day, repacked, and went to the game on Sunday at Moda Center, and then flew right out after that game to Golden State to play the Warriors on Monday night. So, really about 36 hours of time. Oh, and by the way, too, there was also daylight savings in between that, the spring forward. So we actually lost an hour as well. So not only did you return home from a long road trip, only have one day off, and then play back to back, but you also lost 1 hour on Sunday because of daylight savings too. So, or daylight saving, I guess it's not plural, whatever. But either way, a tough little stretch of games there for the Trailblazers. Not even a stretch of games, but just a tough schedule there for the Trailblazers. And so you wish they could have got one of those games. Was not the case. We're not able to get the one versus the Pistons, which is the game I think you felt most like you had a chance to win. I mean, Oklahoma City, even though they sat a lot of their guys, you're still playing in Oklahoma City. You haven't won in Oklahoma City, and I mean, you haven't beat Oklahoma City in a long time. I think maybe 4 seasons now. Haven't won in Oklahoma City in I don't know how long. And that one doesn't go Portland's way. They come back. Fortunately, the one for the Pistons does not go their way either. 34 points, 2 rebounds, 2 assists, and a steal for Anthony Simons in that game. Ant on a pretty good run offensively, at least scoring on his own. I think he's got 4 of his last 5 games. I think he scored 30 points. Assist numbers have kind of fallen off a little bit, which, that might be something the team probably needs to address or at least consider. But scoring wise, Ant has been great as of late. As I mentioned, Jeremy returned for that game. Jeremy Grant, 25 points, 2 rebounds, and assist in the loss as well. 15 points, 5 rebounds, 2 assists for Scoot Henderson in that game. 12 points, 4 rebounds, 1 assist for Shaden Sharp. Cade Cunningham leading leading the Pistons at least with 28 points in that game as well. So the Blazers end up losing that game. But, on Bill Walton night, you still kind of feel good about it. It's going to be a tough game. Pistons paying on the second out of back-to-back after having lost the night before in Golden State. So we really were doing the whole, like, you play Golden State, then we'll play Golden State kind of thing, which a lot of times is how they set up those trips. But I'd much rather be a team on the second out of a back-to-back I think they're on a 4-game trip, than a team at home, not on a back-to-back, but coming off of a 2-week, 7-game trip. So either way, Trailblazers does not end up getting that one. We head out right after the game to San Francisco to face the Warriors in another game that unfortunately the Trailblazers not able to get, and kind of played out in kind of a similar fashion to the Pistons game. And that's kind of what I'm talking about too, is that, it seems like the Blazers are consistent right now in terms of how their games versus some of the better opponents are going. As I mentioned on this last road trip, you play the Jazz, you play the 76ers, you play the Wizards, teams that, are really struggling. And you win those games, and I wouldn't say necessarily you won some of those games handily, but games you felt good about winning those games. You were like, we're gonna win this game. Then you go into the more coin flip games. I would say a game versus the Pistons, more of a coin flip. A game these days versus the Warriors at, I always want to call it Oracle, whatever they call their building there. Now with Jimmy Butler as well, that's going to be a tough one. Blazers have had as you well know, I'm sure, a very difficult time beating the Warriors in the last decade, and that goes double when they're at home. And the Trailblazers not able to throw that yoke off. They fall 130-120, second out of a back-to-back on Monday in San Francisco. As I mentioned, very similar story to the game versus the Pistons. Warriors take a 19-point lead at the half, Blazers get that down to 10 in the third, and I think that actually four with about, I think, a minute and a half to go in the third quarter. I think WAP hits a three-pointer to get it down to 4 points, and at that point you're like, hey, maybe something going here. And then the thing that you're really accustomed to the Warriors doing, they don't do it as much as they used to when they were in their heyday, when they were really kind of the favorite of the league, but still having the ability, particularly versus teams like Trailblazers, young teams, to go on little short spurt runs at the end of quarters to take what was a 4 point lead and turn it into a 10 point lead going into the fourth quarter. And, that's a killer. Even though you still have a quarter left to go, we've seen it so many times that when the Warriors give you an opportunity to get close, you have to take it and then you have to hold on to it. And because if not, they'll hit three pointers, and the next thing you know, you look up at the big screen and you're down 12 points when you were just down 4 points. And basically something very similar happened to the Trailblazers at the end of the third quarter in that game. They finished the third on an 8-2 run, pushed it back up to double digits, go up by as many as 17, I believe, in the fourth. Blazers, again, get close, but never really looked like they were going to get over the top in that one. A game where, when you're on the road playing the ninth game in the last 16 days, you got to do everything just right. You can't make mistakes. You can't turn the ball over. You can't lose opportunities, or you have to make the most of the opportunities you are going to get. And the Blazers just not able to do that versus the Warriors, which, the Warriors are a veteran team. Obviously, Jimmy Butler getting a triple double in that game, first triple double of the season for the Warriors, which I was actually a bit surprised by. You got Steph going for the 4,000 3-pointers. I think he needed 7 in that game. He ended up getting 5 in that game. So, the Blazers didn't have to play perfect to win that game, but they would have had to have played almost perfect in the second half in order to give themselves a real chance. And, they gave themselves sort of a chance. But again, when you're at whatever they're calling it, I'll say Oracle, you are going to have to do everything just right. And you're going to have to do it consistently in order to have a chance to get a win in that building. And the Blazers just not able to do that, which again, you don't make excuses for it. They are playing better basketball. They're not getting blown out necessarily, but they're not also giving some of the better teams a game where you feel like they had a really good chance to win. You feel like they did have a chance to win. It's enough to keep you engaged. I don't know if it's enough to convince you that they were going to win those games, but again, I think when you're the Blazers, you're rebuilding, you're trying to get better, you want to get wins, but as I mentioned over and over and over again this season, and as I would say has been the case since the start of 2025, they're at least conducting themselves in a fashion that you can be proud of. They're conducting themselves in a fashion that you can see where they're trying to get to, where they're going. They've improved defensively, which is nice. So you're not just out there just getting rolled over and hoping that you're going to hit a bunch of three-pointers or to be competitive. But they're not to the level yet where you really feel like they're going to be able to challenge some of these teams, particularly if they get down early. If they're able to stay close throughout the game, similar to the way they played the Cavs, and though they were up on the Cavs quite a bit in that game, those are the games you feel like, hey, we can maybe get this one if things break our way. They can't get down early in games and still have a chance versus the good teams. They can get down early in games and still compete well and stay, within 10, 12 of those teams, but staying within 10 or 12 is not a win. So, that's something that's, as the rest of the season goes on, you imagine they'll probably work on a bit. But even then, like, it's part of that process. And I'm not saying you have to lose those games, but not exactly surprising that you're losing those games. And the fact that you're losing those games, but doing so while also playing some pretty decent basketball, that's not necessarily a bad thing. So 34 points in that game, which is a season high, to go with 16 rebounds, also season high for Denny Avdia. He had a first half double-double, which is the first time in his career he's ever done that before. He was 11 of 15 from the field, 5 of 7 from 3, 7 of 7 from the line in that game as well. A very nice game for Denny Avdia and his return after missing a couple games with that quad injury. Also had 6 assists, 2 steals. He became the first Blazer to score 34 points, grab 16 rebounds, and had 6 assists since Clyde Drexler did it back in March of 1990. That's a long time. Your boy was 10 years old or 9 years old at that point in time. And also just the fourth Trailblazer to ever put up that stat line. As I mentioned, Clyde Drexler did it, Bill Walton did it, and Maurice Lucas did it as well. 32 points, 2 rebounds, an assist, and there were just one assist for Anthony Simons. As I mentioned, string of 30-point games for Ants, not so bad. 15 points. I feel like someone's always getting 15 points in this team. That's really not a very interesting comment, but I always feel like someone ends the game with 15 points. I'm looking at the box scores. I always see a 15 on there for some reason. That's not especially interesting, but there you go. But a good game for Donovan Clingan, particularly against the opponent too, where like the Warriors are a tough matchup for a center like Donovan, but he handled himself well. 15 points, 9 rebounds, 6 assists, 4 blocks for Donovan Clingan. I've been asking guys kind of about Donovan's passing ability. 6 assists is a great number for Donovan. He's really been throwing some nice dimes here as of late. As he's been starting, kind of getting some chemistry with the guys in that starting lineup. I think understanding the rhythms, understanding kind of where guys are going to be at, where they like to get the ball at. I feel like we've seen a nice little stretch here from Donovan. Also curious too, now that we're back from that extended road trip. What the situation with DeAndre Ayton, what the situation with Robert Williams is. I imagine we'll probably get some clarity about that maybe later on in the week. Blazers hosting the Knicks on Wednesday, and then having, I believe, 3 days off before having another back-to-back on Sunday, Monday. So at that point in time, maybe we'll get a little more clarity or at least an update on the statuses of DeAndre and Robert Williams. But even so, in their stead, Donovan Clingan doing a great job holding it down, as is Twop Reith and Jabari Walker. All those guys really doing a nice job filling the gaps while DeAndre and Robert have been out. 12 points, 4 assists for Scoot Henderson, and 9 points, 8 assists, 7 rebounds for Shaedon Sharpe. Getting close to a triple-double there for Shaedon as well. So he's also a guy who, not scoring a lot of points as of late, but playing some pretty good basketball, kind of doing a lot of different things, playing better defensively as well. Still making some mistakes here and there, but you would expect that. But really like what we've seen out of Shaedon, both his energy level on both sides of the ball, particularly defensively, particularly early in games too, as he's been starting, I think has really been a nice development. So, and again, like, you're seeing some good things out of this team right now, and it's not necessarily translating to wins, but I think you can feel good about where they're at and where they're going. And the fact that, again, they're staying close in these games, I think there's something to be said about that. It's not at some point in time you're going to have to start winning those games, but I think that's probably more of a next season, the season after that concern, and not so much a concern this season, even though you would like to win some of those games. But either way, Trailblazers have now lost 4 straight, including 2 in a row. Well, I guess 4 in a row, but the last 2 in a back-to-back on Sunday and Monday. But returning home, as I mentioned, to host the Knicks and to start a extended, I believe, 7-game homestand, which, if nothing else, great to get back in Moda Center for an extended period of time, get a chance to get some practices in. Not many practices, if any practices, heck, not even shoot-arounds really on that last road trip. So getting back into the practice facility, getting a chance to maybe work through some things, refine some things, address a few areas where they've maybe slipped a little bit. I think that's a really good thing for this team, and hopefully coming into this homestand, maybe able to break this losing streak, if not versus the Knicks, but then sometime soon after that. Well, as I mentioned, the Trailblazers on a 4-game losing streak. However, they did break their losing streak versus the spread. They had lost 3 straight versus the spread, ended up covering versus the Warriors on Monday night. Trailblazers were 12-point underdogs in that game, ended up losing by 10. So if you're looking to pressure luck a little bit more, head on out to Spirit Mountain Casino, which features hundreds of state-of-the-art slot games, including brand new games like Phoenix Link. Whether you're into traditional slots or progressive jackpots, Spirit Mountain Casino is here to elevate your game. We had a great run, went to a couple casinos on that last road trip. None of them as nice as Spirit Mountain Casino, Highway 18 in Grand Ron. Check it out. Hotel, gaming, events, concerts, dining, everything you want and more at Spirit Mountain Casino. Elevate your game. With about a month left in the 2024-25 season, the Trailblazers at 28-38 sit at 12th place in the Western Conference standings, 16 games left to play. So if the Blazers want to get into that play-in conversation, they're going to have to start winning some games consistently, and they're going to have some teams above them start losing some games. At this point in time, it's really not even enough for the Blazers to win. They're going to need some help from around them as well. They're 1.5 games behind the Suns, who are on 11th, and they're 5 games behind the Mavericks in 10th, the 10th being the last play-in spot. And they're 6 games behind the Kings, who are in 9th. So Blazers need to get into the 10th or the ninth spot in order to qualify for the play-in tournament, which means they're going to need to pass at least one team, probably two teams, up to as many as three teams. It's going to be pretty difficult, but there is some reason to be optimistic about it, or at least not optimistic, but at least kind of pay attention to how that is going to shake out. Um, we have the Mavs, who I mentioned are in 10th, between the Luka trade and losing Kyrie for the rest of the season and a bunch of other injuries that they've had as well. They've lost 7 of the last 10. So at this point in time, if there's any team you'd look at kind of in that 9, 10, 11, 12 range that you would imagine is probably going to drop off, I think the Spurs, who are now below the Blazers, they're one of those teams because of Victor Wembanyama being out for the rest of the season. I think the Mavs, obviously, another one of those teams as well. Not sure if Anthony Davis is going to come back this season or not. If he does, that obviously improves their chances considerably. But as of right now, they've had so many injuries. Losing Luka, not well, they didn't lose Luka, they traded Luka, and the kind of the downstream effects that has on the rest of the team has resulted in them kind of taking a bit of a dip, which you lose your top two players, one to injury and one to a very interesting trade. You imagine that you're going to start to fall in the standings, and that's what the Mavericks have done. So a chance the Blazers are able to catch up to the Mavericks to get over the top of that one. But again, they're also going to have to pass the Suns as well. The Kings, the Suns, and the Blazers have all been about 500 in their last 10 games. As I mentioned, the Mavericks have lost 7 of their last 10 games. So that provides an opportunity for the Trailblazers. Again, just getting past the Mavericks won't be enough. They're going to also need to get past the Suns. You look at the schedules, no one has an especially easy schedule. I would say the Mavs probably have the easiest schedule of the 3 to 4 teams that are fighting for that last play-in spot. Let's see, what do they have here? They have the Spurs, the 76ers, 2 games versus the Nets, the Raptors, and the Bulls. Some tough games in there as well, but those are all very winnable games, at least winnable games when they had their full roster or something close to their full roster. Again, if Anthony Davis comes back, not sure kind of if they're still going to try to get into that play-in spot. I could see there being some desire to do that considering the way that things have gone in Dallas this year. I imagine their fans not exactly stoked right now, so making the play-in might, I don't know that it would heal those wounds, but I think you'd feel better about making the play-in than you would about missing the play-in, particularly when you have the Lakers with Luka now, I believe in second place in the Western Conference, and at this point in time, one of the favorites to win the West or the championship in general. Well, they're probably like 5th favorite to win the whole thing, but either way, the Lakers are a much better team now than they were before the trade, and the Mavs are a worse team now than they were before the trade. Part of that's because of injuries. Part of that is when you trade an MVP guy, you're likely going to get worse. Either way, the Mavs, not sure if they're going to make the play-in. Again, they have the easiest schedule, but they probably have the most difficult road to hoe in terms of what's going on with their team. Then the Suns probably have the hardest remaining schedule of the teams, the Blazers, the Suns, the Kings, the Mavs. They've got 2 games versus the Rockets, 2 games versus the Kings, 2 versus the Celtics, 1 versus the Lakers, Timberwolves, Thunder, and Warriors. That is a pretty tough schedule. One thing, though, since they do play the, let's see, who did I just mention? They play 2 versus the Kings, so that gives them an opportunity to make up full games on the Kings. Rather than just a half game by getting wins. So, on one hand, if they're able to win those games, that really helps them. If they lose those games, though, it's tougher schedule. So not entirely sure if they're going to be able to leapfrog the Mavs as well. That Suns team too, boy, with as much talent as they have, for them to be on the outside looking in right now in the play-in is pretty wild. And and just in general too, like just the difference between kind of the bottom play-in standings in the West compared to the East, not even close. The Blazers are a playoff team in the Eastern Conference this season, I think, rather than fighting for a chance to get into the play-in. But that's just how conference play goes. So the Trailblazers kind of in the middle in terms of their remaining schedule. They've got the Raptors, the Wizards, did I have the Raptors twice? I wrote that down twice, maybe just once. Bulls, Jazz, and Spurs. All those games, very winnable games. A fair amount of those games at home as well. But the bad news is they have 2 games versus the Knicks, including the game on Wednesday at home, then another game versus the Knicks at MSG to begin, or not, maybe not begin. It's the second game of not long last road trip of the season. Also, game versus the Kings to start that road trip as well. They also play the Celtics again, the Cavs again, the Grizzlies, Lakers, and Golden State once again. So that's pretty tough too. I, you basically, if you're Portland at this point, you need the Mavs to slide considerably. Again, just playing 500 ball for the Trailblazers, which I think when you look at their schedule, playing 500, I think you'd feel pretty good about that outside of kind of what the standings are at, just in terms of kind of the caliber of teams that they're going to be facing. But that's not going to, you can't make up 5 games in 16 games by playing 500 basketball, even if the Mavs do start to slide, because again, you're going to also need to get over the Suns in order to get into that 10th spot. Possible the Kings drop off. That doesn't seem super likely to me, but there's always a chance there. Possible the Suns just decide to say, forget it. We're giving this thing up. That doesn't really seem very likely at this point. Because I don't think they have any reason to. Like I don't think the Suns own their own picks, or that's kind of the other part too, is that, sometimes teams, once they decide like, well, it's not really going to happen for us, we might as well, maybe just look to develop some players and maybe get a better draft pick. Feels like a lot of these teams nowadays, they don't know their draft picks anymore, so there's really no cause to be like, well, let's tank this thing because they're not even going to get their own pick anyways. Trailblazers in the reverse situation there, if the Blazers do make the playoffs, their first round pick goes to the Bulls as a part of the Larry Nance trade, which, God, that's the fact that that's still hanging over after 4 or 5 seasons now is pretty wild. So the Blazers do make the playoffs. They don't get their pick. If they don't make the playoffs, they do keep their pick. Getting into the play-in is not technically making the playoffs too, by the way, folks. You have to actually be in the top 8 to make the postseason to qualify for the playoffs. So just getting into 10th doesn't mean that you're still a lottery team if you get into the play-in, but then you lose in the play-in. So Trailblazers going to need a few things to break their way in order to make that play, but it is something they're motivated by. You're going to hear from Toumani Camara here in a second, and he mentions the play-in as something that they're rallying around the idea of trying to get into the play-in. The players, while there might be some conflicted feelings in terms of the fan base about making the play-in, no conflicted feelings in the locker room about that. Those guys want to make the postseason. In order for Portland to make the postseason, you got to make the play-in, and get lucky or catch a hot streak and win 2 games in order to make the postseason for the first time in I think 5 or 6 years now for Portland. So that is something that the team is motivated by, something that they're shooting for, and something they're trying to get to. So you don't know exactly what the Mavs' motivation is. The Suns, I think they're motivated, but at this point in time, they got to be thinking to themselves like, even making the play-in like is way below what our expectations were going into the season. So even though. So it seems to me that I guess they're coming from a perspective of like, we have to make the play-in because how can we have this much talent and not make the play-in? Then you got the Kings who, they kind of decide to go a different direction by moving Darren Fox. Obviously, they make a coaching change as well. So you would imagine that they are also probably wanting to get into the playoffs as well, just to show that like, this version of the Kings with a new coach and different players that are kind of, again, moving into kind of different prominent roles, I imagine that's something that they are trying to do as well. So you can make a case that the Mavs probably don't care too awful much about it, though. Again, I'm not entirely sure what the Mavs situation is with their picks, but the other teams, you assume they are going to want to make the postseason, which means for them making the play-in. So the Blazers are going to need to get lucky. They're going to need some help from some of the teams that are playing the Mavs, the Suns, and the Kings. And that feels like a lot of help. Like if you got to pass one team, okay. When you got to pass 2 teams, when you're trailing by 5 games with 16 to go, a little more difficult. And Blazers, I believe, I think they might have the tiebreaker versus the Suns, which is helpful. I don't believe they have I know they don't. Well, no, they don't have the tiebreaker versus the Mavs. And I'm not sure if the tiebreaker versus the Kings has decided just yet. There is obviously 1 game versus the Kings left to go. But either way, I don't think tiebreakers are. They're going to have to. they're going to have to win a lot of games, and they're going to have the teams around them lose games in order for them to get that spot. It's very possible. I would say we'll probably know. I mean, we'll definitely know by the end of this homestand if when they go out on this last road trip of the season, this last long road trip of the season, if the play-in is still going to be something that is a possibility. If it is, then I think you really feel good about your chances going out on that home or road stand to see what you can do. Blazers have been a fairly decent road team this year. If not, then maybe they decide to make some changes in terms of rotations and kind of accept that. But that's not decided just yet. There's still opportunity there. There's still probability. And again, while it's going to be difficult, it's definitely not something where I think you'd be shocked if it happened because, again, the situation with the teams around them and the way that they've played since the start of 2025, I think, gives you cause to feel like, hey, if they're able to get a few things that break their way, both in terms of their own games and the games the games with the teams that they're going up against for this last play-in spot, some of those things go their way, they got a chance. But they're going to have to do their part, and they're going to have to get some help from the teams around them. Or not the teams around them, they're going to have to get some help for the teams playing the teams around them. They need to lose. Blazers have got to win. Teams around them got to lose. That's basically what you need to know at this point in time. Blazers 5 games back from the 10th spot with 16 games to go. All right, let's go ahead and hear from Toumani Camara. Talked to Toumani over the course of a couple days on this last road trip. Talked to him after the game versus Boston. So you're going to hear him discuss, the loss to Cleveland and then the loss to Boston and how that game went. And then I talked to him a few days later prior to the game versus the Thunder in Oklahoma City. So a little bit of a two-parter, but covered a whole host of topics. Talked about obviously winning a Defensive Player of the Month, whether or not he feels like that changes the way that opposing teams view him or play him. His thoughts on that road trip and how the team has been playing as of late, wanting to make the play-in and how that's a motivating factor for this team. The notion of defense being kind of really team-oriented and how, him winning Defensive Player of the Month is in some respects a team award. The way that he is starting to kind of build his profile and if he's at all surprised by, how quickly that's gone. I mean, like last season, people were like, hey, Toumani looks like a nice little player. It really seems to me this year, and I mean, maybe part of it is from being on that road trip and seeing kind of the reaction that he got on the East Coast. A lot of international media starting to pay attention to Toumani. So I think maybe that's part of it, but also just the way he's played, the attention that he's getting from opposing teams now, his improving offensive game, all those things. I think really, you set your expectations differently for Toumani now than you did at the beginning of the season, or at least I know I do. So, we talked about that a little bit as well. And just his thoughts on his second season, how the team has played, the camaraderie on the team and, getting an opportunity to be more of a player and have more of a role than I think, even probably Toumani expected when he came out of Dayton 2 seasons ago. So let's go ahead and hear from Toumani Camara in Boston and Oklahoma City on this last road trip. So first off, I hear with Toumani Camara. So Toumani, getting close into this road trip, how would you say you guys have played throughout this road trip? How has it felt for you guys? And it seems to me you guys have maybe kind of come together a little bit during this trip.
Yeah, I mean, we finally have an objective that we can play for. We have a chance to maybe make the play-in, so we just came together as a team, and we have a common goal that we all can relate to. And on the road trip also, try to be above 500. Try to win as many games as we can, and I think we had a great road trip so far. We still have one game, so we can't let one loss demoralize us as a team. I feel like we've been doing a great job, but we just got to stick to it. And we're still a very young team. We're still learning a lot, man. So I'm very happy at where we at today.
You guys take the Cavs to overtime. This game, you guys are able to stay close, even when they push ahead. You guys are able to keep it, within shouting distance. Do you guys take pride in that? I mean, because Chauncey was talking about how proud he was of the way you guys perform. As a player, can you feel that too? That's like, even though we got the loss, like we can still feel good about the way we competed and the fact that we were still in this game.
I think yes, in a certain way, just because you can look back at how we played last year, how difficult it was sometimes for us to find ways to stay close in the game. So it shows growth. Now I think as competitors, how much we love the game and stuff like that, it's still hard to end up with a a losing game, especially against a great team like that, when you know it was a possible win for us. So, I think it's just it could go either way. How you see, I think both feelings go through our mind throughout that time.
Yeah, so you wish you had got the win, but also there's a part of you that's like, well, yeah, but I understand that there's something to take from growth. And how would you say that growth is coming? Because I would say since 2025, it really seems like you guys have made progress. I mean, defensively, you guys look like a whole different team sometimes. It seems like you guys are kind of starting to figure some things out on the offensive side as well. Does it feel like you guys are really making strides now, particularly as a guy who was here last year as well?
Yeah, well, I think everybody's maturing. Everybody's getting better. It's 82 games. It's like almost 3 times a college season. So you grow so much throughout the season. You understand things so much throughout the season. So I feel like everybody's on the same page. Everybody got the same missions, like I mentioned. I think we're just trying to keep growing as a team, and we trust each other. We're really like a family, like brothers. So we're looking out for one another. There's no such things as competition within the team. We just compete with ourselves every day and try to be better. So I feel like it's something we've been good at, and I think there's so much more room for us to grow.
When you have that relationship, you can support each other, but I think you could probably also challenge each other a little bit too, and maybe you wouldn't be able to necessarily if you didn't kind of feel that kinship with them. So what is it like to build those relationships, knowing that like, hey, now we can kind of maybe be a little honest about things than maybe we would have otherwise?
It's huge. It's huge. I feel like the connection between players on and off the court is what really help teams separate teams from others. I think the way we were able to grow off the court, talk to each other, respect each other, and on the court being able to feel more comfortable sharing the ball with one another. Is not as many ISO plays as it used to be. So I feel like our connection within the team is getting way better every day.
Western Conference Defensive Player of the Month, your thoughts on winning that award? And I imagine in some respects it feels maybe a little bit like a team award too, because defense is something that like it really is a team element of the game.
For sure. I wouldn't be able to get that without my teammates. Our defense was, in the last stretch, I think number 1 in the league right now. We've been keeping teams almost below 100 points. So it's like we've been playing good as a team. I feel like it's all about energy and connection, like I'm going to go back to all the time. We really trust each other, and we want to see each other succeed, and I feel like that's what we're able to play like that.
Especially on this trip, it feels like, your profile is really starting to grow. You see we got people from Europe that are coming to talk to you. Like, what's it like to get more interest in your game?
It's interesting. It's something that I didn't expect. I didn't have any expectation on that end. I didn't really know when it was going to happen, if it was going to happen ever. I just try to play hard and play the game that I love every day, and it just comes with things changing by just getting better every day and stuff like that. So I didn't expect it to happen like that, but I'm very grateful that people recognizing my effort and will to win games.
Do you feel like you hear more from people back home? Because it seems like there's more interest, at least when I'm in these media sessions. Like I'm seeing more and more people from Europe, more and more people internationally, and they all basically are asking about you and about Denny. So I'm curious, like if you kind of hear from more people back home now about like, hey, I kind of saw this, that, or the other thing.
For sure. I think since I got drafted, a lot of people was talking about me in a certain way, and then a lot of people didn't think I was going to play, or didn't believe just because I was a Belgian kid, or didn't really know much about me and stuff like that. So being able to do big things on the big stage, I feel like make a lot of people open their eyes and stuff like that. So I feel a different type of energy coming from all around for sure.
Your profile has grown as a defender. Obviously, you win Defensive Player of the Month. Do you feel that from opponents? Do you feel like maybe like scorers being like, I want to try to get some on this guy because I think now that your profile is growing, I think, like when the guy's a great scorer, as a defender, you're like, I'm going to shut this guy down. So I'm wondering if, like, do you feel like scorers kind of go at you now, be like, I want to show that I can score on this guy?
I don't think so. I haven't been showing that, really. I think a lot of people, I think it's scouting and stuff like that and try to attack matchup. I feel like that's something the offense do a lot. Try to attack quote-unquote the weakest defender on the team and stuff like that, which is something that I don't really like, but it's part of the game. It's something that we try to do too sometimes. So it's just all part of the game. But no, I don't think that anybody's trying to challenge me to that end.
It might start at some point in time, but you're right. I think it is more of a thing where it's like, let's get away from that guy, not so much like, let's go into that guy, which also makes sense too, because why would an opponent want to play to your strength, I guess. What can you explain the box a little bit?
The box is, the court is a rectangle. It's separated in two halves. And when I'm able to get a stop, whether it's by myself or as a team, I feel like when the team didn't even have no options, whether it's a 24-second count or whether it's a turnover, taking a charge, or just defensive plays stacked up on top of each other. I think create like a box scenario where it's like we have this team with this person in the box because they're not able to get out of it, and we kind of like taking control on the defensive end. So that's kind of my explanation of that.
It's a good little thing too, and you don't see as much defensively. Like guys do stuff when they score, but like not as much on defense. And we talked about you as a defender, but like you really do have an expanding offensive game. How would you describe the way that side has come along for you?
I think it's growing so much. I feel like I've been working on my skills almost my whole life. Just never was able to put it to use into games. Always had a different type of role. So yeah, it was just try to adapt throughout my career and try to find ways to have some playing time, no matter what I had to do. So I feel like now I'm in a scenario where I'm on my right position, and I'm able to kind of expand a little bit more every day, try to understand a little bit more every day of my game, my teammates and stuff like that. And I feel like the game is slowing down every time I play, so it's just keep on maturing and keep on working on my skills, and I know the sky's the limit for me on that end.
Absolutely, Toumani. You mentioned the play-in. How motivating is that for you guys, and how much are you kind of paying attention to the standings and where you guys are at in your schedule, maybe kind of what some of the other teams around you are doing as well?
We're going day by day. We're trying to focus on ourselves. I mean, that's the only thing we can do. If we give it our all in every game, doesn't really matter what other team does. At least we give ourselves the best chance, and I think that's what we're trying to do right now. Try to win as many games as possible, try to play as well as possible, and I feel like we've been doing good. So we just got to stick together and keep doing what we've been doing, and I think everything happened for a reason, so we'll see how it goes.
There you go, Toumani Camara on that last road trip. And again, I think for me, I don't want to jinx it, but it feels to me like an all NBA team for Toumani is the bare minimum this year. I've talked to so many coaches, opposing coaches over the last couple weeks about Toumani's game. A ton of respect there. And more as you get further and further on into the season, initially when you ask about Toumani, they would talk about defense. That's still the majority of what gets talked about, but he also has, I think teams are starting to realize too that he is starting to round his game out a bit. A much improved shooter, a guy who can get to the rim, obviously a guy who can finish at the rim. He had that fantastic dunk off of a nice pass from Donovan Clingan, by the way, in the Pistons game. Another testament to the inequities of the NBA dunk score. Should be higher than it is, but we'll leave that for another day. In fact, we're not going to leave that for another day. I'm just not going to talk about it. Really feels to me like, Toumani is someone who is, he is a building block for this team going forward. A guy who I think next season too, like if he's able to continue to make the progress that he has made throughout this season and last season, going into the 2025-26 season, I really think sky's the limit for Toumani. I think this season, I think bare minimum is an all NBA team, as I mentioned, or at least, excuse me, an all defensive team. Really, again, a guy who wasn't a throw-in necessarily, but not the primary player in the trade with the Phoenix Suns that also brought in DeAndre Ayton, but one that has shown to be incredibly valuable for this team. A guy who any team would want on their team, and just I hope it comes across too. Toumani is a great guy. Like he is so good to work with. He is kind, like he treats you like a person, and I've noticed that from some of the international guys too. I think that sometimes they just feel a little like, since basketball isn't as big of a deal in Europe, I think sometimes it's like they're just happy to get any kind of attention. And Toumani he's just got a really good head on his shoulders. His family obviously did a great job raising him. And a guy who is really made strides on both sides of the ball. You got to give a lot of credit to Toumani. You got to give a lot of credit to the coaching staff as well. And the other thing I wanted to mention about Toumani, it was in Boston. To show kind of what kind of a guy Toumani is, like Toumani was shouting out Tucker, one of our video guys, for some of the edits that he put together of some of the Toumani highlights. And he mentioned in multiple occasions during his post game, he's like, Tucker's doing a great job. I really appreciate the work he's putting in. So for a player to kind of make note of the work that someone on the video team is doing, I think just goes to show the kind of person Toumani is, the way that he views the team and, his role, and just the way that I think he views himself, and the importance of showing respect to the people in the background who are kind of putting in some of that work. And particularly for young players, like when guys get older, they kind of realize those things. Not always the case with younger guys. And granted, Toumani did spend 4 years in college, so a little bit older than general second year guy. But definitely someone who I think appreciates, the work that gets done around him. I think he notices things. And again, I really enjoy working with Toumani. I really love watching him play too. He's a guy that, it's not just like, oh, he's really out there trying hard, like he really understands how to play defense, positioning, how to carry himself on the court, how to be aggressive without being kind of, I don't even know the best way to put it, like negative. Like a lot of times I feel like, some of the better defenders in the league are known as kind of jerks a little bit, or like there's almost like this idea that you have to be kind of a hard ass in order to be a good defender. And that's not necessarily the case. I mean, it might help, a lot of times, defense, you do have to, it can be an attitude thing sometimes, but I think with Toumani, like the fact that he plays the way that he plays and is as aggressive and determined and focused as he is on the court, and then the way that he kind of conducts himself off the court, I think it's a little bit different, and it really makes Toumani, one of the guys that I think people appreciate in the locker room. People who cover the team really appreciate Toumani. He's always willing to take some time. That was, as I mentioned, that was 2 separate interviews. A lot of times you get a guy the first time, and then if you don't get everything you need, which what happened, we're in Boston, we're trying to catch that first bus, so it cut it off a little bit shorter than I would have. And, I had some good stuff, but I didn't have enough. And a lot of times it's like, well, you just got to make do, because, getting the guy again is, we don't even want to ask him, let alone, he's going to say no anyways. Not the case. Toumani is very generous with his time, is willing to make time for you, which again, I think, for someone in my position, it really means a lot. And, you get a lot of respect for guys who treat you with respect, even though they don't necessarily have to. So good for you, Toumani. Thank you so much for the time. I hope you guys enjoyed the interview as well. And that's going to do it for this edition of The Briefcase, presented by Spirit Mountain Casino. Thank you so much for joining me, as always. Back with more episodes later on this week and throughout this entire homestand. Trailblazers, as I mentioned, hosting the Knicks on Wednesday, 7 o'clock start time on KATU 2.2 and Rip City Radio and Blazer Vision. So for myself, thank you so much for joining me, as always. Please like and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. I'm Casey Holdahl. We'll talk soon. Go Blazers.